Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing board game designer Emma Larkins, the creator of Abandon All Artichokes, Starry Night Sky, Squabbling Goblins, and the upcoming storytelling game Epilogue, Finish Your Story. In Epilogue, players will cooperatively improvise a story about how they all died, based on connected word fragments between cards. Players are encouraged to support each other through the story and their choices, and find a way to connect all their storylines. Was their death a part of some shenanigans, tragedy, or just some accident that happened at the banana peel factory? It was an absolute delight to interview Emma about her work and Epilogue. Whilst we don't normally cover board games on this channel, I'm a big fan of getting people into the GM seat and telling stories, and getting people confident in telling stories together. I really like how simple Epilogue is, and importantly, there is no mistakes, so long as everyone is having fun. The Kickstarter campaign for Epilogue has fully funded, and it's in its last few days at the time of this episode's release, so please go check it out and support it if you can. I'm going to put a link to that and to Emma's website with all her work on it and the relevant links in this episode's show notes. Brilliant. And so we're just going to start off really nice and simply. Who are you and what do you do, my friend?
My name is Emma Larkins, and I'm a board game designer, creator of Abandon All Artichokes, Starry Night Sky, Squabbling Goblins, and the upcoming Epilogue.
Yeah, it's very exciting to have you here on today's show. So
Thank
Emma,
you.
my big question for you is how did you get into board game design? Were you always someone that played board games when you were younger, or was it something that you got into recently? And how was the transition over to then designing your own games?
Yeah, I played some board games when I was young. I remember very specifically Mousetrap, for example, which always frustrated me because it was supposed to not work. That part of the, I'm using air quotes, design of the game is the trap not falling down, and that frustrated my systemic logical brain. But I was actually more into video games when I was young. My dad was a software engineer, so we actually had a PC computer very early on in the late 80s. So I kind of came up on video games, and also I would make my friends invent playground games for them. So
yeah,
kind of always had gaming around me and in my background. I didn't get into game design until much later, when I was living in New York City and getting into some of the both digital and physical game design communities there. I made my first prototype of a board game, which was a Valentine's Day present. And exactly like you'd imagine a kindergartner making, cutting out construction paper hearts and gluing them to pieces of paper. I learned a lot about prototyping after that, but that was my first.
That's adorable.
And
I love that.
Yeah, it was adorable. It was fun. I was able to be crafty about it and was able to play test that in the New York City tabletop design community, and it worked surprisingly well. I think for my first design, a lot of people say it takes a while, but I think just kind of my technical background and technical writing, and I had a lot of pieces that came together at that time, and it was really exciting to see it all come together and to see people have fun with my game.
That's awesome. So for you then, what's your favorite kind of types of board games? Is it the crunchy type, or is it the more free flowing? Because it sounds like the stuff like you said with the elements coming together. Does it matter necessarily about the genre or like the overall vibe of the game, as long as it's got those sort of systematic elements that you're talking about?
Yeah. Especially these days, the brain and attention span and stuff. I like things that are pretty easy to get into. I gravitate more to those. I play a lot of my games on Board Game Arena, which also reduces some of the friction getting into, especially new games. So I like to pick up faster and lighter games and weirder games. I've played so many games at this point that I'm always attracted to something where I don't know, you pull weird things out of a bag, or you make strange noises, or, the esoteric, it's like the hipster aspect of game, the hipster phase of game enjoyment. But I do go for some crunchy games. I do have a brain that thrives on kind of figuring out systems. So I think the sweet spot for the crunchier games is the one with a fairly simple loop. But once you figure out that loop, you can kind of dig into it, especially complex card games where you figure out the combinations on the cards. And once you understand what's happening, you can iterate and make cool things happen in the game.
So a lot of the stuff we covered here on our podcast is mostly role-playing games, but it's interesting because there's now much more of an overlap, I think, with board games. A lot more RPGs are having like cards and stuff like that, and like building like Daggerheart, which is the new Critical Role stuff. They have like cards that you can interchange in and out, so that having those physical elements there. Good Society is another one as well, where you don't necessarily need the cards, but having the physical, like almost what I would consider board game elements, kind of helps people play the game, certainly in person. So it's interesting to hear you talk about like having those elements of like of board games to get people involved, and like you said, that simple loop of like, oh, but then now can it branch out from here? And like I do think, because I think some people would think like, well, role-playing games and board games are very separate things, but actually there is a lot more overlap than I think, and certainly in the last 5 to 10 years there's been a lot more like integration of stuff, and I feel like we don't have a clear definition of either one or the other anymore, you know?
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that there's so much that either genre can take from the other one. I think the structure of board games can be nice because some people can be intimidated by the freeform nature of, just coming to Dungeons Dragons and here's a book, and you learn from the book, and you need a game master or a DM who's very skilled and can lead everything. So having components or pieces to help, especially with the mechanical aspects, because parts of role-playing games can be very mechanical when you get into combat and skill checks and things. So making those things easier. And on the flip side, some of my favorite moments from role-playing games have been the sitting in the tree late at night on watch, with another party member, and they're telling their deepest secrets in character, and you're having this meta moment of two characters connecting together. So there's like story connections. I really love, and would love to see more of that in board games as well.
One thing I really love, and it's something I've spoken about a little bit, not necessarily on this podcast, but different podcasts, like you said, that sort of free-form role-play stuff, like you're telling a story together, but then, you have to win a competition, you have to do something, and then bringing like a game into that. So one of the things, like in Wizards of the Coast, they've got like a free Dragon Ante or something like that. So they have like a gambling type thing, and you can buy that game and bring it to your table. And there's certain modules that will encourage, I say, not gambling, but that sort of like push your luck type things. And that's something I always wish more games had. Like I know, like going back to what you're saying about like video games, like The Witcher, for example, that had a whole, I can't remember the name of the card game now, it's just slipped my mind.
I think it's Gwent,
exactly. So they made like Gwent as a physical like board game that you can play because it got so popular in the thing. So it's one of those things where I feel like more and more, maybe that, we've got those role-playing games, I think most people, once you get into it, you understand them. It's okay, you don't have to have that many mechanics, but if you add like, I don't want to say props, that's not the word I'm looking for, but like you said, like board game elements, or like a game within a game, then it's like another level that, again, just gets you immersed in that story, in that world. And so, I really do see that. And I think that's what I hope, is that people get more into it, and also as a way to learn board games as well. Because I do think sometimes, I say this as someone who has never designed a board game. But there's nothing, I find when, you have a board game night and they go, okay, we brought this brand new game. You go, excellent. And they open it up and you're all very excited, pull out all the pieces and they go, right. And you open the user manual and you spend 20 minutes trying to read whatever, like not the most UX friendly design of the thing, and so then you play it wrong, but then you go, oh, it should have been like this, and you improve your learning through going through it. Whereas sometimes in role-playing games you don't get that. You go, we don't need to go back to this game because it's a very different experience perhaps.
Yeah, gosh, you've touched on something that's kind of a quest of mine at the moment. I've been thinking and talking a lot about people with the learnability and teachability of games, and yeah, exactly that kind of experience where games are fun and people love games, and sometimes the barrier can be this learning moment in the beginning, but there's so much about games and the mechanics of games that could be used to learn and teach. You know, the video games are a lot better at this with the tutorials and how they kind of take learning and failure and make it fun. And I think both in role-playing games and board games that could be something more integrated to make, 'cause it's all about fun, right? You know, like what you're in a role-playing game and you're going on this grand adventure, and how do you make even the mechanics of the story, because it is a contained thing, you know, you're in the magic circle. So how do you use the tools of this to make it even more fun and exciting than, you know, talking about your trip to the laundromat or whatever.
That's, again, just springing broad off that, is that sometimes I feel like they're fun and they should be fun. And I think learning ultimately should be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of times we, you know, especially recently, as an adult as well, like there's been a big growth in, you know, board game clubs, board game cafes, RPG clubs, etc. at schools, and there is this like underground movement is not the word I'm looking for, but there's a growth in popularity about people doing these things, and I feel like people are, oh well, they're doing it for fun. I was like, but they're learning from it as well. You know, they're learning to count, they're learning to use these elements, these systematic elements, putting them together to move along the story or to best analyze the situation. But you're having fun doing it. And that's the key thing, I think, because sometimes the traditional methods of learning, you just get bogged down and you feel like, oh, I know all this, or it's just cramming it in and just repeating it back, spooling it out. Whereas if you can learn certain skills in these fun settings, not forced, but it's more encouraged, you can suddenly adapt and have those skills everywhere. I know they always say like role-playing games obviously is transferable skills for everything, but similar with board games as well. Like you learn a lot, and by engaging in healthy competition or healthy cooperation depending on the game as well. So it's an interesting thing, which I feel like capitalism is obviously always like buy the games, but they don't but not like buy the games to improve yourself, they make you better. It's just buy the games, get the plastic, you know.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it a lot too, because I'm learning guitar. And music theory is something very slippery that's always evaded me, because it every time you learn a rule, it's like, and then the math is weird, you know, it's like, and then sevenths and fifths and thirds. I'm like, that doesn't math. But my new teacher started describing, he's like, this is the song, these are the scale degrees, this is why it's helpful for you. And then I looked at another song, I'm like, oh, and these fit together. Wait, but then this chord doesn't fit into here at all. But there's something about that puzzle that makes me much more interested in learning the pieces of this, where I was sitting down and looking at a book and just trying to fit it in there without the context. It would be a lot less exciting, but I find myself motivated. You know, I want to play around with this to understand.
It's true, yeah. You feel motivated, and it's also a social thing as well, because obviously a lot of board games, most of them do require at least two players, not all of them. And same with role-playing games as well. You have that sort of enforced social time. Then the flip side of being an adult is also then people are way too busy. So you have to desperately go, please play this game with me. But it's interesting. I feel like, again, it's something that I've discovered in the last couple of years, is that I use RPGs and board games as a way to socialize and obviously learn these things as well. And I think I've only brushed like the top of the iceberg, you know, like I feel like, oh, I should have done this years ago. I should have done all these things years ago, and would it have benefited me like financially or career-wise? Probably not, but I would have experienced all these things. I could have done a lot more things. I would feel like the world is a bit more open because I get to try these things. And I guess it's because, I don't know, it's one of those things where like, you have to do the thing and then experience it and go, oh, you should play the thing. And that's where the cult status comes from RPGs and D&D and all that sort of thing. But it's so rewarding. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a rewarding experience if you take the time to sit down, play the hour-and-a-half game of figuring out the puzzle, and then going, oh, we should play this again. And you know who would like this? So-and-so. And just, getting those little connections of like, almost like you have to be there moments. I think it's very hard to sometimes communicate that across to people. Yeah.
I think a huge piece of it too is acceptance of failure.
Yeah.
The way you described it, I really like, is talking about reading the rules and then playing it wrong your first time. And I think a lot of people in these spaces, for various reasons, don't want to fail or look like they're failing. Mm-hmm. I've found a lot of people who are less into board games, one of the reasons is, you know, kind of that fear of failure or fear of appearing dumb in front of other people. And that's a that's a huge thing. And just, I want to say to people, it's totally okay. We all do it. Failure is not that scary, but I feel it as well. When I'm teaching and learning and playing it, when I'm losing at games, especially, that can be a very intense feeling, but a good learning experience, for life, to be able to fail, especially in front of people, and ideally have that be accepted and we can see a shared experience. I think we need more of those. As scary as it sounds.
But it is, isn't it? I think, again, as someone who's grown up, female presenting, and then having that society thing, like, you must be perfect, and worried about if I fail at something, that's it. My life is over. As dramatic as that sounds, but yeah, we exactly. We both sort of feel it, and there's obviously this pressure, and also, again, like I said, there's sort of the capitalist way of things. So people go, well, if you don't make it a financial success, what's the point? It's not worth anything. And it's so interesting to, like I said, it's taken me a long time. And I've mostly found like that fear of failing hopefully diminished somewhat by doing improv and stuff like that. And role-playing games. So suddenly you're like, oh, so for example, I'm learning Magic the Gathering just now. My partner's really
yes.
And my God, there's so many games going on. I have no idea what's going on. And I constantly have to ask questions and stuff like that. But ultimately, if I just sit down at the game store and go, I'm really sorry, I'm brand new to this. I might need you to help me with my deck that my partner has put together for me. And they instantly, just because I've just been so transparent, they've gone, of course. And it's a more of a learning experience, because then they can teach me, and they go, oh, I see what you did there, and any mistakes and stuff like that. And it's just so rewarding to just be upfront and transparent, going, I'm going to fail. And you know what? Not my problem. It's everyone else's problem to accept it and then learn, as you said, and have fun with it. Because a lot of times when you get so stressed about getting the rules right, certainly in board games, it's just like no one has fun, and you're just like, wait, this doesn't. Even if you think that something's wrong, you go, this doesn't seem right. I give myself 30 seconds to find the rule. If I can't find the rule, whatever, I'll figure it out.
I've had that, and trying to work on it, I can be a little bit of a stickler for rules, or just that nagging. I think it's the perfectionism, exactly like you said.
Backseat DM is what we have here. Yes, I'm like, well, actually, this is how you do the grapple, but you're like, no, let them work it out.
The going on BGG and looking at forums, or I know designers, so messaging the designers directly and being like, hey, is this how you intended for this to be? And you're right, it's usually a less good experience for everyone involved, and you learn more when you fail and go through it than necessarily trying to make it be perfect every time.
I like the fact that then you're willing to find out, though. That's the thing. Like, if you're able to message designers in a nice, polite way, going, this doesn't work, but it's like, how did you intend it to be? I think, like, I don't know about yourself, but like, I find, like, when I've spoken to RPG designers about their games and, like, what's it like for it to go out into the world, and like, a lot of times they don't know, because there's they don't know if their games get played. So I'm always encouraging people to like give that feedback, it constructive, obviously, but all compliments back, because then people know their games are being played and someone's played an experience of it and have enjoyed it and stuff. And I think that's, again, it's worth the effort that you've put in, like you were talking about before, like prototyping and learning a lot from that, and then at the end, that reward of one person emailing you saying, I really enjoyed this. Can I just check, does this work like this? And then you can have that conversation because someone's interested in your passion project. So, see, lots of stuff. We've got completely off topic, but I'm just like, interesting.
Sorry. Yeah, it is. It can be kind of going into the void when you put things out there. So it is always nice hearing when people enjoy, even not enjoy, but people have a reaction to the things that you've made is very valuable.
No, absolutely. Well, let's get back to the topic at hand. Sorry, I go off at all these interviews. So let's talk about your upcoming game, Epilogue, Finish Your Story. So for those people who aren't aware, what is Epilogue, Finish Your Story? And how does it differ from all the other games that are out there currently? What's its unique elements to it, I guess?
Epilogue is a cooperative storytelling game where you play as ghosts trying to figure out how you died so you can pass on to the other side. The game is composed of 26 tarot-sized cards with word fragments on them. Each card is double-sided and has 6 or 7 word fragments on it. So you flip it over and it might have, for example, AKE, HEC in different positions on the cards. And the mechanics of the game is you put a card down on the table everyone has their own cards, and someone puts a card on the table with the card that's already there and builds a word. So if AKE is on the table, you might put a T card, and all of a sudden you have the word take. And where the storytelling aspect comes in is, so I've made the word take. Normally, I would say, okay, I have to make a word, and I have to tell a story about this. But in Epilogue, you actually get to throw someone else under the bus. So I make the word take, and I'm going to point to someone else, and they have to start the story anywhere in time or space or fantasy using that first word that I make. So, for example, I might point to you, and you'd say, it's dangerous to go along. Take this. And you can say as much or as little as you want. And as soon as you finish speaking, you're going to make the next word and point to someone else. So it goes around that, like the table, people making words and adding to the story, kind of like line at a time storytelling. Yeah. Until the last card is played and the last person pointed to ties the ribbon, ties the bow on the story of our passing. It's like, and then 10,000 bears came out of the woods and consumed us. And that's how we died.
Oh, I love that. So yeah, almost like a story spine, like improv game where, like you said, line at a time, but a continuous story. So when you say, like, so that example you just gave then, like, take this, when you say story, would it be like, is it like as if it was like once upon a time telling that sort of story, or is it more like what it sounded like, there's certain like snippets of like here's some dialogue, take this, and like almost like a montage thing? You can, I'm guessing, either or
yeah, it can be anything that people want it to be. It's fascinating. I've seen so many games of this unfurl, and no story is anything like any of the other stories which have happened. Would you think they'd be after a certain point? It's like, oh, I see themes coming through here, but just the haunted arcades and carnivals and fantastical space stories and peanut allergy on a cruise ship, everything. It's just the creativity in normal people is, I say normal people, but everyday people, anyone really, anyone can be a storyteller is thesis that this game proves over and over again. And yeah, so it's very much up to people. Often if I'm telling stories with more improv theater people, they might say a little bit more. Right. People who are not as used to that might say, someone plays the word cat and say something like, the cat's sat in our laps. Yeah. And either of those, and then somebody makes the word taco or something. So you have to get from cat to taco.
Yeah, so really
the creativity of it is what connects it in ways, and people have to work with that. And then all of a sudden, you're telling an often pretty funny, interesting story based on those pieces.
Something I've discovered through teaching improv as well. If you're, like you said, so people who are brand new, and brand new to role-playing games, and they're a bit sort of like not sure. So having something as simple as just that, as a simple prompt, just helps them start the thing, and there's like no pressure, zero stakes, because then like you said, like first of all, there's that it's going to be you at some point. It's not like, okay, I've got take, okay, what can I think of that? I go, it's your turn. I can go, oh, phew, I don't have that word. But equally, you could get that back on you as a different word. So I like that the word you create isn't that, because it's something I've done before with students, is that often I'd be like, okay, we're going to paint the scene of the room, like do a role-playing scene, but like paint the scene of the room of, say, and they could be like, oh, this is a long dining hall with candles, and there's like a long bench, and there's just one chair at the end, and all the other chairs are disappeared or gone. And I'm like, great. You don't get to play in that scene, though. Somebody else does. And they're like, oh, what? And I was like, well, too late. So it's that idea of like, you're giving a gift to somebody else, or a curse, depending on your word, perhaps. But I quite like that, because that encourages you to not like, it's almost like a twofold process. Like, okay, I've created the word, and now someone else can go, oh, this word means this. And you're like, I didn't see that. And vice versa, go, I've got this. Socks? I don't know. Like, so I like that. It feels very, it breaks it down into like easy chunks where both of them do different skills, if you see what I mean. So I really like that. Why death in the nicest way possible? Why Epilogue? Because obviously this could be a story about anything, but why specifically death?
The earliest concept of the game came to me in a dream. So I had,
as all good games do.
Yes. Dream first game design.
Exactly.
Even before I had the word fragments of the story element, I had the idea of seeing visions in something kind of like pareidoia, where you look at wallpaper and you see faces. So like, how can I make that spooky? You're looking at something and all of a sudden a thing becomes clear to you. So it had a spooky vibe from the beginning. And after playtesting, I just found that the death, as dark as it is just such a good anchor for a story. I've had people, especially more familiar with storytelling and role playing, ask me about the mechanics and say, "Oh, do you need to impart like a 3-part structure? How do you make it easy for people to tell stories who aren't as familiar with it?" And having the death piece there, and then the first word makes most of the arc. You know, you have a starting point and you know where you're going to end up.
Right. Yeah.
So everything from there, you're building with a lean towards the final goal. And I had it be, a lot of storytelling games don't have an endpoint.
No,
you know,
yeah.
I think, is it once upon a time? There's a few, more storytelling games where you're making a freeform story and there's no set endpoint. And that, or even a role-playing game, you know, that can be fun as well. But I think it's often a little more compelling when I played role-playing games to have a goal, you know, something you're working towards and have that in the back of your mind. So having the death piece, it's something that's universally known to people, you know, and they can kind of put the pieces together. People seem to really enjoy it. Kids love spooky stuff.
I was gonna say, I can imagine children be like, "Oh, let me tell you." Yeah, I can imagine them really getting into that. Yeah.
I made a more kid family friendly version, a variation called "Will You See What Happened?" was based on something my friend's 5-year-old said.
I like that.
What
I like
happened
that
to the
name.
lamp?
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you see what happened? was. But yeah, I don't remember what I tried a few different things, but it was the death goal that really sharpened the focus.
Yeah.
For people.
Weirdly, I don't see it again. Maybe it's because of, to be fair, you've got some really beautiful artwork and packaging it. So I don't see it as like a very serious game that we must tell this story. You know, it feels more like, like you said, that like what happened. It feels like, so how I died. You're gonna laugh because of this. So exactly. It's not the serious thing. So I appreciate. I know we're joking about like death, but it feels like it's putting like a light sort of like comedic thing on it. Like you were saying before, like here, take this, and then the monster ate me, and that's how I got up here. You know. It is almost matter of factly, and I quite enjoy that. And I did assume as well that there is a wide audience for it. Like I said, I can imagine children absolutely loving it, just like going right in, and then you go, okay, like you said, Taco, go on, Mum, and you're like, what have you given me with a story? How am I gonna? Okay, I kind of like it because the other game that it reminded me of was the Baron Munchausen. So that idea is like you find a prompt and you're like, oh, so tell us, Lord Windermere, how did you escape the polar bear with just a rusty spoon? And so you know where the ending is, but obviously it's like, we've gone 100% to Madness Town, you know, we've gone on the wild ride. And so he's like, well, it's just going to get, it's going to be ridiculous. Whereas like, and that's how I died, or that's how I came to be here. You don't know where the silliness or the ridiculous element may come. It might not. It just might be a very straightforward, like I slipped on a banana skin. Oh, whoops, you know, that's it. It just, I like that. It feels like you don't know where it is, and it can allow for that room and for the growth of being like, oh, okay, now we're up here in terms of like Beetlejuice era, you know, like sort of like, well, small skulls, like underground, and then trying to weed our way back to our story. So I quite like the variation that the theme has on that percent. If you see what I mean. I appreciate I've just gone all over the place with that idea.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely 100%. It's often humorous.
Yeah.
Almost all the time. Hilarious and surprising and thought-provoking. One of the funnest ones I was listening in on at XOXO Fest recently was something about time travel, and they were sparring with swords. It was a group of 7 people playing the game, so they were all sparring together against their opponent, and somebody made the word X, you know, like EX, and so they shouted out, oh, and we realized that our sparring opponent was our ex. And so it's like, oh, all of our ex? Like, yeah, it's a Scott Pilgrim situation. You know, it's like all of us. And that just these moments, everyone was like, whoa, you know, just this collective
like mind
realization.
meld type thing. Yeah.
Mind meld. It's often very silly and fun and kind of poignant and beautiful too. Like I like to slip in kind of secret, deeper themes to things. And, the death isn't something we really talk about a lot in our culture. It's something that we really prefer to avoid. And I think it's kind of fun that people do talk about it in this game, and they don't probably think about their own mortality within the scope of the game, but just making it kind of a safe space where you can poke fun and joke about it a little bit and just have conversations, I think can be a very powerful thing. Just to say, like, this is this is something that is part of life. It's okay to talk about, and having fun with it is a way to approach it.
Absolutely.
Make it approachable.
Normalizing it as a thing, like, and not, I wouldn't say like undercutting the seriousness of it, but like it's just something that we shouldn't be scared of talking about. Like I had on a little while ago, we had my friend Ibris, who's also a game designer, and she's got a solo RPG out called Jude's World, and it's about Jude's parents getting divorced. It's almost like a Parent Trap type thing, and about how Jude's going to get them back together, and how those kind of films where people are forced to be together aren't good. And how do you talk about that? Because obviously, again, divorce is a topic that we don't necessarily talk about. Or it's seen either in the Disney like, oh well, they're back together now, or really bad. And it's just like some people, it's the best thing for those relationships, and they get on fine. And so I'm a big fan of RPGs and board games that allow us to explore these things and give us, I think you said, it's that approachable way, but also the safe, like the magic circle sort of aspect, so that we can just like, we're all on the same page here, and we're not going to step out of that sort of comfort. We'll step out of the comfort zone a little bit, but not like, we're not going to test ourselves. It's just like, oh, this is something we can talk about. So I just found it was very interesting that, as you said, like, I love the title of Epilogue. It totally makes sense, but it's like, and this is how you died. But it's like, what? It's like, oh, that's really interesting, really different.
We're very proud of the title. Me and publisher and artist and graphic designer worked on that. So this game is actually a long time in the making. It's been through at least 3 iterations.
Oh wow.
When I first made it in like 2016, it was called Confabula Rasa, which is the worst title.
I love that though. What a great word.
I just, as a hyper nerd, I loved it, and I thought it was so clever. And people would be, the test is when you hear someone telling someone else about your game.
Of course. Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, Emma made this great game. It's like tabula. It's she made a game. It's really great. You should find out what that is.
Oh no.
So then I had that in the Indie Mega booth at PAX, and had like a very small self-published version of that. And then it got published as And Then We Died, which is a fun title. And I love that we came up with that title, but also a little hard for people to remember exactly what the title was. Titles are really hard, and when you land on one and you just like feel it, that's just very special.
Yeah, no, definitely. like you said, I'm in awe of people who create this stuff and then have to be their own hype person to be like, okay, and then have the pithy like elevator pitch and then a good name. And it's, I appreciate in this day and age, for both board games and role play games, it is very much like, it's on you to be like, and here's my game, and this is why you like it, and you're just like going like, oh, could somebody else, like you said, I love that idea of like, you overhear someone else trying to explain it, and then you're like, oh no, I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board about the name, or like, okay, because as soon as someone is promoting something that you've created and you're just listening in, you're like, oh, so that's how they see my game, and that's how they pitch it. And because we've done that at other like conventions as well, when with a couple of other podcasts, so we always get the other people on the table to promote the other people's podcasts, because then we can go, that's a much better copy, we'll write that down and we'll use that in future. So this game has obviously been in the works for a long time, and obviously we've got the upcoming Kickstarter and stuff. I guess my first of two, like a 2-part question, is like, what is it about the design process that you find not necessarily difficult, but sort of challenging? What's been challenging about this process? And how have you been able to overcome that sort of challenge, would you say?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
There might be none. There might be loads of challenges.
Oh, there's challenges, all right. And I love talking about them, too, because especially newer designers or wannabe designers listen to these podcasts or read my design diaries, and I really want to share because it can be a tough process.
Right.
One of my recent games, Starry Night Sky, I wrote the design diary and I have 3 Dark Nights of the Soul.
Oh,
So it's like not 1, not 2, like 3 points where I literally wrote in my sketch journal, I'm in the Dark Night of the Soul right now. Game design is a series of inspiration, prototype, test, so that inspiration hits reality. And most of the time it's like a bug flying into a window shield is that inspiration hitting reality. It splats and makes a big mess, and that's working with some newer designers and seeing them struggle with that. That's really one of the hardest things is you have these ideas and it feels perfect before it hits reality in your chest. You see the vision of what could be, you see the mechanics perfectly laid out before you, like a montage in a movie where everything syncs up and everyone's happy, lives happily ever after. But yeah, you can't think through mechanics in a way that captures everything that will happen when they hit reality. Even self-play testing, you can learn a good amount, but it's only getting things in front of other people that all of this stuff comes up that you never would have thought of because no one is omniscient. And that's hard to go from that hopefulness and inspiration and joy to failure, you know? Like we were talking about, it's not failure, it's learning. If you approach it correctly, it can be an exciting, joyful part of the process. But, it's like having a crush on someone and imagining your entire lives together and talking to them after years or whatever, and they don't like you, or you don't like their voice or something, that the fantasy.
It's not that fantasy that you want.
Hits reality. And it's always, it can be very jarring, especially if you're not kind of prepared for it. So that part is tough. And I would say life keeps lifing. So if you have any other things going on in your life where there's disappointment or stress, that can really reduce your spoons, your strength to be able to deal with those disappointments. But I would say on the flip side that the fantasy was never going to be anything more than a picture in your head. So if you never go through that Dark Night of the Soul, you'll never get to the, I think, even more joyful part of producing the art, having the art, something you can hold in your hands and share with people and communicate your vision to another person.
No, it's so true, because like you said, you have this image in your head of like how it should be, but it's all it will do unless you make that effort, be willing to fail, as you said, go through the darkest parts and go, no one's going to play this game. It won't be there. You've got to put in that effort. And it's one of those things where, I agree. I think especially because nowadays we feel like it's so difficult with the way social media has gone now that, a lot of certainly for RPGs, and I assume the same for board games as well, like, a lot of us relied on Twitter, and now it's like, oh, well, we can't necessarily rely on that anymore. And then like, well, where else can we go? And it's all sporadic and stuff. And it's hard to even like to spread the word unless you have to go out and as you said, use that effort, use the spoons, be resilient to like, just putting yourself out there going, this is my game, this please let me know what you think, and it's this and this constantly. And a lot of the time maybe not getting any engagement, people going, no thank you, and you're like, that's fine, because obviously we've all been there. But it's fascinating. I think, like you said, we do need to go through these things, but I think people are scared to, because they don't want to get hurt, and they don't want to be told it's a bad idea. They don't want that fantasy, as you're saying, broken. And it's like, it's not breaking it, it's sort of tweaking it to be reality. And it will, maybe, you never know, the game that you came up in your head, as you were saying, that the title changed quite drastically, but you had to do that. That's the way it works. And it's so true. And it's so hard, because that is just part of life, isn't it? It's just part of that learning experience of going through these processes and learning as you go, and then learning through the whole experience and going, right, next time it'll be different. And it will be, but it might not be perfect either. Each one of these is like a case by case basis. So then the flip side of this question then, and I think maybe I do know the answer now, but like out of interest, like for you, what's been the best parts of like the design process? What is the stuff that does spark joy for you? Is it the prototyping? Is it the play testing? Like what is it for you that like when you get to that part, you're like, yes, can't wait, you know?
Yeah, I would say it is those points where it hits reality or it interacts with people interact with the game, and you see sparks there. Like it sounds almost cocky to say, it's like you've kindled something, you've created not just a physical thing that's cards and paper and mechanics and rules, but you've changed someone, you've given someone a spark and experience, especially with Abandoned Artichokes, for example, when people understand deck building for the first time. Because I know I had this experience playing Dominion where I had all these cards and they were in the deck. I'm like, okay. And now these cards are different. Okay, but these go in my deck and they come in my hand. Oh, then they're in a different order and I can get
I know what's in the deck. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's epiphany, like you're never going to go back from there. You have an awakening, know? And seeing people with Epilogue, I've seen some of the people who come into the story and say, oh, I'm not a storyteller. I'm shy. And then they say 3 words. That's the funniest thing that happens in the whole story and the whole group cracks up. And I think that person doesn't get that experience a lot, in their friend group. They're not the person who usually makes everyone laugh. So you can make these real things happen in the real world with the imaginary magic circle things you came up with in your brain. So I would say that's the flip side. Having imagination hit reality can be painful, but it can also be incredibly rewarding to see these things happen. I say especially with kids too.
Yes.
You can see them kind of learning and putting things together and changing their worldviews, I think is really awesome.
That's so interesting. You said about like, oh, I'm not a storyteller and stuff. Like it's we have that with role-playing games where people will like play a game, but they'll never want to be the GM or the dungeon master or anything like that because they're like, oh well, I don't know all the rules, I don't know this, and often they do because they're players, so they know exactly how it works. But it's that worry of getting it wrong, as we said before, and that responsibility. But also like maybe then they don't feel like their story isn't good enough. Yeah. Again, same with improv as well. That people are like, oh, to be an improviser or to be a stand-up comedian, all of that sort of vague circle, you have to be witty, you got to be quick, you got to be clever, you got to be funny. And often, again, it's not any of those. Like they help, obviously, but to start off, as long as you say something and just don't worry about what you're saying to a certain extent, but like, just the willingness to do it, that's the thing. And you just see, as you said, you see people go, oh, I get it. Again, it goes back to that whole thing, like you have to do these things. You can't be taught, you have to sort of live that experience. So I love that this game, this Epilogue, is a game to help people do that. And they go, oh, of course I can storytell. It's not like a premium skill that I have to unlock with like payments of $9.99 or anything like that. Although other companies will tell you otherwise, I think.
Yeah, it's an innate skill. We tell stories all the time without realizing it. I went to work today and I had a bad day and I spilled milk on myself. That's a story.
That's a story. Yeah, exactly.
It's a very human thing. Yeah.
I remember one exercise in improv where literally just starting up and be like, we want you to have a boring conversation with each other. And they'll set you up like, oh, you're at a restaurant or you're on your couch watching TV. And you will get dinged like with a little bell if you're too interesting. Because the idea is like, people love watching boring like conversations and stuff like that, and like people will watch it. And I just remember like literally I sat down and I started talking about like I was like, oh, how was your day? Like, oh, I had a bad day. And I was like, was it Steve again? I got dinged off instantly because I knew who Steve was. And they're like, right, next person. And that was just so interesting to me because I was like, that to me was not an interesting statement, but like, so I brought something in. So I like that, using that with people going, okay, you got to be quick and just like try and be as neutral as possible. But people constantly then go, but I have all these ideas, and just encouraging that. Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's that sort of getting people just to try it and going, oh, it's not as hard or it's not difficult. There's somewhere I can start from, and failing, you're not going to fall flat on your face. Everyone's going to be with you that whole time.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be intimidating. I think it's a big thing.
Well, Emma, we've come to the end of our hour. It's just sort of flown by, but thank you so much for coming on and chatting about us. Where can we find you on the socials? Tell us about when the Kickstarter for Epilogue goes out, and where can we find more of your work?
So the big place is Epilogue on Kickstarter. There's the Violet Daisy website, which has some information, and my personal website, which is emmalarkins.com. I'm on the social medias as Emma Larkins pretty much everywhere. I would say these days weird. Instagram and Blue Sky are probably the places that I'm most active and responsive. But if you ping me on other places as well, I'm still checking those. So always like talking to people about design stuff, and excited to connect. And
did you say you had like design diaries that go out for people to look at or anything like that? Is there like a newsletter or something?
BGG. So on Board Game Geek, I will be, as a reminder, all the things to do.
Oh, sorry.
I will be getting, no. This is great. This is like, put my feet to the fire. I will be getting, I have my other previous design diaries. If you look up designer Emma Larkins, my stuff is on there, but I will be getting the design diary up on BGG soon.
Nice. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. Best of luck for the Kickstarter. And
thanks for having me.
No, thank you. I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, just let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.